Alright, basic mechanics of swaging and dapping. I've got a trowel form, so basically a giant lozenge type piece. I'm starting at the back on this because I want to get the primary form to come in. Whenever you're swaging, whether it be a thick section piece of material or thin like this, you have to lay your lines. So be meticulous about laying those lines, running through the center, pushing that down, and then laying additional lines going out from there.
Can we draw that on the chalkboard?
Sure.
So they know what you're talking about?
So you have a flat object like this, you're trying to come down to divot like that. Run a line through the center. That will drop this down into a V-type form, more or less. It's going to be a soft V, obviously. And then run additional radial lines, which will then push like this, so on and so forth. And eventually, you wind up with a spider's web, which creates this.
Can you also draw that as like from above?
Sure.
Where those lines are? So
on this particular object?
On this particular object, yeah. Because when I teach this, sometimes the students don't quite understand.
That kind of looks like it, right?
Yeah.
Obelix would be very happy with that. So the initial line I will lay is straight down the center. Once you've got that line down the center, don't try and go all the way to the bottom, try and stop a little shy. Then I'd run a secondary line out here and out here, which will fold it out wider. Then maybe return back through the center again. And in so doing, what I've essentially done is gone from flat to V to kind of that shape, and then back through to the center to make the center deeper, and then finally push to final form.
Awesome. And this is what I wanted to point out, is a lot of times people think they need to follow the line of the profile rather than going
straight up middle.
Straight. Exactly. And then they end up with twists and weird stuff.
Yeah, and also being aware of what is center line. You've got to be careful of your material, how your material folds as well. Look at that. I started in the broadest back section because that will form easier than, or it has more leverage on it than the front section. So that's kind of my initial push. You can see that line down the middle. I'll flip it again and I'll run two outer lines. This can be problematic because if you then try and hammer something over here, it's a little weird. So if you are somewhat semi-ambihammerous, which I'm vaguely, not awesome, but in this regard it's quite beneficial because it'll keep that energy a little bit more even. You can already see it trying to pull out on me. It's trying to get a little bit of rotation. So I just got to keep that in check in the next push. And that's all you're ever watching for. Whether you're swaging the jaw of a pair of square bit tongs or whatever else it might be, just be aware that if you get energy going one way or the other, it's going to start rotating on axis this way. And if you get your line of pressure off center through that form, it will actually start to kind of create a helix form. It will crease it this way. Some of these things are beneficial when you want to do them, but if they're not, or if you don't want to do them, then they're less beneficial. And I was rummaging earlier. There we go. So these two creatures are essentially the same thing. It's just that this one has been creased and folded. And you can see that that line actually ran off center and caused a little bit of rotation. But in the final forming of these, when you get the two pieces together, you can actually control those quite nicely. But it's funny things that you have to deal with. Anywho, back to the endeavor. So I worked right-handed first time, so I'll work left-handed first this time. And I'm not trying to follow the line of the object, I'm trying to follow linear lines through the object. Does that even make any sense?
Well,
Yeah, to me, in
to
my
me
brain.
it does. So rather than following the line that you have on the profile,
The profile,
you're
yeah.
following the center line. So you're just basing your lines off center.
So running through here,
Yeah.
through here, through here.
Yeah.
So don't get tempted to run around that corner here.
Yes.
Run straight out.
Exactly.
Likewise on the other. And you can keep folding this as tight as you want. If I wanted to go a little narrower, I could run it through a smaller swage. Throw it on the floor. And remember, when you spin it, you're now working it from the other side. You need a little bit more heat in it. This is where you see how dexterous I am with my non-dominant hand. Look like a rank amateur with this thing. But always starting with the root being the wider section, getting that in order and running through to the tip. Because that tip is essentially just a continuum of that wider trough. The curve is exactly the same. There's just less of it, right? Funny hand signals.
So right now you're still running down that center line.
Yeah,
trying
you
to
can
get
see
it to
I'm running
push.
off ever so slightly as well.
Yeah.
So, got to be aware of that.
Now you're running your two lines to either side.
Yeah, got that rotation going. Awesome.
That's not bad though.
Yeah. I need a little crease there. I could just kind of roll.
So now you're just sort of doing your cleanup work.
Yeah, just kind of dressing it, trying to get certain parts to roll with me. This swage block's trying to run away from it. We have a perfectly adequate swage block stand at the other side of the shop. Yeah, that will kind of sort of do. There's a little bit of a run out there. And of course, the negative form is also beneficial to work with the positive form. So you can work the two together, or even just treat it as a essentially a scroll. Funny idea. There you go. I don't know what it looks like from that angle. Relative.
It looks
Yeah.
like a shovel.
Looks like a shovel. And you can obviously fold that up. I did a demo of the ferrule on an arrowhead or something. Same idea, the same process of forming. So you can actually use a swage to help form up a ferrule on a chisel or on a spear or an arrowhead, that kind of thing. And you're always playing back and forwards between the swage and a comb, or swage and fuller, those kinds of things. And remember that the ideal swage block set would have a match for each one of these. So you'd have equally, if you have a radius of one side, you'd have its negative or positive in a hand tool. Or you'd also have, so probably that one, yeah, there you go. So these two would match. Obviously you could take it, depending on the thickness of the material that you're actually trying to compress, you can take it to a larger size, or using a smaller size fuller in this one. But the idea being that you're using negative and positive together, or you use negative and negative, which I don't actually have a set because I never really do that kind of stuff anymore. But using negatives to, say, form up a tenon, something like that, or rounding up bar stop.
So where people see this a lot nowadays is when people are making Damascus billet.
Yes.
So if you see people using, say, a press with a double V swage, so it's a V on the top, V on the bottom, and then they run their billet through that to make square bar,
exactly,
whatever. So that is swaging.
Yeah, and especially if they're trying to, draw down patterns, mosaic patterns, W patterns, those kinds of things with little distortion. That's what you do, is you basically swage through. And always with swaging, you take your time. There's no rush for these things. So you've got to be methodical, you've got to be clean, you've got to be kind of ordered in your process. So, yeah, that's what it is, really. Take your time with it, figure out what those lines are, make a few pieces of mess, and try it again.